Probably people are following up the most recent economic developments, but we'll just wait for the attendees list to populate, and then we'll just start. Just wait a couple of minutes, see who else joins. Okay, I think we could start now. We have at least a parity between panelists and participants, so I think this is a good start. Hello, everyone. My name is Gustav Stefanov. I'm program director at CSD, and I'm very happy to welcome you to this workshop or international conference on decarbonization pathways in Southeast Europe. Before I start with a few introductory remarks, I'll just let you know that this, as you've seen, is a recorded session, and we will do this recording throughout the session. So if you do not agree, please just either stay without your camera on, or let us know, or leave out. In addition, my colleagues will post in the chat box below, in the Zoom chat box, they will post the rules of engagement. We have a fairly short session with a lot of interesting panelists today, and I think it will be very, very engaging. We look forward to a good discussion. So whenever you feel like it, you could post a question or a comment in the chat box, or you could raise your hand, which is also an option below, so that the moderator could see you and give it the floor. And also, please be active and raise your questions. We will also provide, I assume, a link to the study that we'll be presenting today. CSD has been working for quite some time with our partners that you will hear today in the panel, to produce these scenarios, and I think this is one of the few such available for Bulgaria, which is quite encouraging, because I think Bulgaria needs this. We have I think one of the few remaining countries to have their recovery and resilience plan approved. It's nowhere near there. We just got a number of remarks back from the Commission, with a lot of comments, in particularly concerning the sector, the energy sector within the plan, and I think this will be one of the topics that we'll be broaching today. Now, let me just mention one more issue, and I think it's, I mean, you've probably seen it in the news that apparently the current price hike has resulted in a lot of knee-jerk reactions in governments all across the world, but also particularly in Europe, and of course a lot of requests to ease the constraints of the common EU market, to kind of back up a little bit from the ambitions of green transition. All sorts of ideas of how not to do the green transformation. I think we all agree that this is actually not the answer, but the actual green transition is the answer, because essentially the bottom line of this crisis is, as in most previous crises, being that we are relying on a finite resource. So we will see such spikes in the future if we don't take energy and climate transition seriously. And I would say that most probably the Southeast Europe region, where the most of the panelists come today, is the weakest link. I guess this is where the boundaries of the scope or the ambition of the European Green Deal will be tested. And I think there is also a lot of differences between the countries here. We'll learn that today too. But I think generally that we'll be among those that will as the slowest moving part of the system, will be the one that will be also making sure the whole system moves with the speed of this part. With that, allow me to stop here, to welcome you again on part of CSD, to thank our distinguished panelists today for being with us, to thank the European Climate Foundations who have supported our work on that, and to now give the floor to my colleague Martin Vladimiro, who is Director of Energy and Climate at CSD, and who will be moderating this discussion. Martin, it's your turn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruslan. This is really a great panel, and I know we are among friends. So we have worked at CSD with all of you on a number of analytical projects, different assessments, modeling scenarios, thinking about what should be done in terms of policies. So I know that in this room, in this virtual room, we have some of the best experts on energy and decarbonization in Southeast Europe. It's great also to see Michel Cornet from Climac, with whom we have worked over the past 2 years on developing Bulgarian scenarios using Climac's amazing and very useful tool called the EU Calculator, or the Pathways Explorer, as we have noted it in our report. It will be great to have a regional view of decarbonization policies with a focus on the energy sector, but also the EU context, which I think Michel will be perfect to showcase, also using the tool as kind of a visualization instrument for policy making, for policy decision making. So with no further ado, I'll give the floor to my colleague Constanța Rangova, who will present our latest report based on 2 alternative scenarios for decarbonization, trying to capture both the current policy framework, Bulgarian decarbonization, and also an alternative, more ambitious scenario for long-term decarbonization. Constanța, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin. Let me just share my screen. I hope everybody can see now. So good morning and a warm welcome to this webinar. We have a very exciting 10 minutes ahead of us when I will present our latest report. It's 50 pages long, but I hope that by the end of the presentation, you will be convinced to go to our website and take a look at the most interesting details. Now let's dig right in. What did we do worth 50 pages describing? So we designed 2 alternative decarbonization scenarios for Bulgaria, and you can see the key parameters of the 2 scenarios on the right side of the slide here. So the long-term or LTS scenario here presents a credible pathway to decarbonization for Bulgaria. So this scenario demonstrates this is not some dream for Bulgaria, but it could become a reality. And we have listed here, what does this decarbonization path entail? So first of all, we have replacing coal with renewables. This is one of the key elements. So accelerated fossil fuel phase out is one of the keys. We also need to focus on reducing energy poverty, and I will touch upon this a little bit more in a few minutes. Improving security of supply, which means reducing dependence on natural gas, and in Bulgaria, this is Russian natural gas, and also improving the resilience of the grid to make sure that we can accommodate larger shares of renewables. And one of the most important factors that we need to take into account is strategic allocation of public funds. This is because public funds alone will not be enough to make real this decarbonization pathway, which means that the public funds need to be spent with strategic vision for attracting private capital into this transformation of the economy. Now, let's look at what the policy scenario entails. So as I mentioned, we have two scenarios. The second scenario is the policy scenario, which takes into account the National Recovery and Resilience Plan and the National Energy and Climate Plan. So the key measures from these two strategic policy documents. And the result is that Bulgaria, under this scenario, with our analysis, would not reach carbon neutrality by 2050. Actually, what we're going to see is about 15 million tons of CO2 equivalent by 2030, of which 30% will come from the energy sector. So what we see is that the reduction in energy consumption through energy efficiency will not be enough, and we're still going to have quite a bit of fossil fuels contributing to the production of heat. We also have limited changes in the building sector. So what we have in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan is additional investment into shallow renovation of buildings, which is not enough to drive a true transformation in terms of energy efficiency. And even though you barely see building sector here on this chart, which shows you the greenhouse gas emissions from different sectors, the building sector has an indirect impact on emissions from the energy sector. And then we also have very limited ambition for the transformation of industry and transport. As you can see, emissions from these sectors barely change by 2050. And because of this, industry becomes the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, because we don't have enough ambition in terms of transforming industry into smart and efficient and electrified system. Now, what do we do? What do we need to do to actually change this and arrive at a more credible and efficient pathway to carbon neutrality? Now, energy sector is key, and this is why in the next couple of slides I will focus more on energy sector measures. And as I mentioned before, one of the key elements that we need is an accelerated phase out of fossil fuels. And here I have listed some of the main elements that we have discovered in terms of what is the most cost-effective transformation for the energy sector. So the first thing is, number one, accelerated coal phase out. Bulgaria's coal power plants are very old and inefficient, and they cost a lot of money for consumers. And it's only now with the extremely high power prices that they don't rely on government subsidies to operate economically. So we have a very slow phase out of coal under the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. Actually, we only have about 1/5 of the coal power plants expected to be phased out by 2030. Nevertheless, with today, they're being utilized only at half of their capacity on an annual average basis. By 2030, this will be 34%, which means that they will cover only 20% of Bulgaria's electricity production. So this will be capacity that will be sitting there without being efficiently used. And at the same time, it will lead to a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. Then we also need to reduce dependence on Russian natural gas. This means that at the same time, we have energy security improved because we don't have this exposure to Russia as a supplier, and we also reduce the exposure of the economy to volatile fossil fuel prices. And finally, what needs to be done is scaling up renewables as fast as possible and relying on relatively small projects compared to other ideas that have been circulating in the Bulgarian let's say, energy expert sphere, is focusing on new nuclear power plants. However, this is a very capital-intensive project that has very high risk of delays and mismanagement, and has a very high risk of not delivering on-time decarbonization. So it would be a lot more efficient to focus on scaling up renewables. And let's focus just for a little bit on the chart here. So you see how we have the two scenarios, the policy and the LTS scenario. And you can see what the evolution of the electricity sector is in these two scenarios. And you can see how the phase out of coal is slower in the policy scenario. And the line, the gray line, shows you how much of the capacity is used. So you can see how it falls from about 50% right now to about 30% by 2030 until it finally exits the system. However, if you look at the LTS scenario, when we have a faster coal phase out, the usage of the remaining fleet is much higher. So we have utilization rising to about 80%, which means that the remaining power plants will have better economics and will be used more efficiently. So this is also another key element to consider when deciding on a faster coal phase out. Regarding the fast scale up of renewables, Bulgaria really needs to tap into the potential that it has in terms of renewable energy generation. And how do we do this? We need to focus on small scale projects, and especially those that target vulnerable consumers, because this has a lot of synergies between reducing energy poverty and at the same time providing a lot of small success examples that can lead to attracting a lot more private capital into scaling up renewables even beyond 2030. So you don't rely only on public funds to create a few large projects, which would otherwise have a very high risk of state capture and would not improve the social acceptability, and they would not lead to endorsement of renewables by a wide part of society. So scalability with small projects is really very important for a really ambitious pathway for renewables uptake. However, this is not what we have in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, and this is why you can see on this chart, the red line shows you the uptake of renewables that we expect under the policy scenario. And when you compare that to the green line, which shows you the LTS scenario, you can see that we have only half of the growth of the LTS scenario by 2050. So this is definitely not enough ambition on renewables generation. What we also need to do is to open the door for offshore wind, for which Bulgaria has a huge potential that remains untapped, and without the regulatory change, it will remain untapped. So we really need to create a regulatory framework in which offshore wind can really develop and contribute to this growth of new renewable energy. And finally, and really very importantly, we need to focus on smart grid solutions and interconnectivity with neighboring countries, because this is what ensures that we can integrate the renewables into the system and ensure security of supply. And by doing so, we create trust and cooperation between countries, and we also ensure that the new renewable energy will be used efficiently and really contribute to fully decarbonizing the economy. Now, let's quickly wrap up what are the key takeaways from our report. First of all, what we need to achieve a very cost-efficient and real decarbonization by 2050. We need to phase out coal by 2030, which will improve the performance of the coal plants that will operate until 2030, and it will also reduce more efficiently greenhouse gas emissions. We also need to focus on decentralizing and democratizing the power system, which is done through renewables, through small-scale renewable projects. We also need to ensure security of supply. And as I mentioned, this has two elements to it. The first one is smart grid, to ensure that renewables function normally and are used to the full capacity, and then avoiding a gas lock-in, so not building new gas power plants. In the industry sector, the key element is to reduce the energy and resource intensity of the sector, which means focusing on circular economy measures, electrification of industry, and innovation. In the building sector, one of the most important things is to increase the rate and depth of renovation and to focus on electrification of buildings, which can be done with innovative financing schemes, for example, focusing on energy service companies and other flexible grants. And then in the transport sector, what we need is a structural optimization, which means that we need to invest in urban rail and charging infrastructure and make it so that there can be a true shared mobility in the system. And also with what needs to be done is to really focus on incentivizing low emission vehicles by providing flexible financing schemes and incentivizing consumers to invest in this. And what is really important and needs to be highlighted is that there are really important synergies between the decarbonization process and reducing energy poverty. And a lot of the measures that contribute to decarbonization can also contribute to reducing energy poverty. And in this way, we have a win-win situation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Constanza, for this very detailed, comprehensive view on the Bulgarian decarbonization potential and the different scenarios for achieving it. It's important to note that in our report, there is a lot more to be read about, specifically on different sectors. There are policy recommendations that could be, that go deeper into how decarbonization could be achieved, and some specific targeted measures for Bulgarian policymakers. Now, switching the gears, as our report is called, I would like to invite Michel Cournet, who is a partner at Climact, a Brussels-based consultancy focusing on the development of cutting-edge instruments for modeling decarbonization scenarios and for policy planning in general, to share some of his bird-eye view on EU decarbonization policy and how useful can such an instrument as the EU calculator be in helping policymakers and experts develop data-driven and really insightful scenarios for the future on which to base their also decisions and policy measures. Michel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin, for the introduction. And thank you, Constanza, for the great interpretation you performed. Do you see the screen? Super. So first, I'll do a few minutes, all in all, some 5-10 minutes. So first, a few minutes on the climate challenge, where the EU has a vision and where member states need to fit in, and then on how the Pathway Explorer can support, be it governments or different actors such as CSD to make an analytically robust low carbon pathway. The context is pretty clear. We need to reduce global warming below 2 degrees, 1.5 degree ideally. Now, we have to act now to be net zero. What is tricky is that the lifetime of most infrastructures which are being deployed now is going to last after 2050. This shows the ambition we have for the moment. Now, at EU level, this gets declined where we have a current situation, and then we have roadmaps onto how to reach net zero emissions, and then the reductions which are required in each of the sectors to reach these emissions. You see that on the right with the current emissions per sector, and then the depth of the reduction which is being required. At EU level, there is a clear agreement to go into that direction. So it's really about the European Council is confirming the fact that we have that. Then we have the minus 55% reduction also coming, and there are many pathways which enable to reach a net zero. The common thing they have, seeing the depth of the ambition that we have, is that they need to be very ambitious across all the sectors. And I'm going to come on to how the tool can help to do that. Now, with Constanza's presentation, you saw a lot of slicing and dicing of the energy activities and emissions information. This is a short example where, starting from an overview of the emissions today, you see how different kinds of levers you can act upon enable to reduce the emissions, be it on social patterns, on the way you organize a society, on the processes, on the fuels, on how you produce the energy, on the capture of the emission, on how the land use that then complements. Now, these are sequential, so it means that the levers to the right, they look smaller. It's because the levers to the left already did part of the action. a zero carbon power production, if you started by that in a highly emitting world, would reduce emissions much further, of course. But it shows the importance of starting by the demand. Now, this is very nice at EU level, but it needs to be decomposed at national level. And especially because the European system works that way, you have all the ETS, which is under one block, and then all this needs to be done for the non-ETS as well. Now, the pictures we saw earlier were mainly for Bulgaria as a whole. We'll also need to have that operationally described, to have a roadmap which is operational for the non-ETS. So let's go and see on how the Pathways Explorer can be one tool to support the analytical foundation of how you would say it's possible to do a low carbon pathway. Now, what does the Pathways Explorer look like? I'll show a live screen. You see it here. You type pathwaysexplorer.org and you arrive on this website. You choose your country, you check if you want to see KPIs or graphs. Here we view graphs which are generated by the model. You can see graphs which are generated by other models as well. And then you have some scenarios. And we saw in Constanza's presentation the NECP, the policy scenario, which here has a more complete name. And then we also have a long-term strategy which reaches to net zero. And basically, you can just choose a story or a scenario. Now I'm just taking the policy one, and then it loads. Should load instantaneously. When it doesn't, we just do refresh. So I'm in Bulgaria, and I'm taking this one. Now it's loaded, and then I can reduce it even further by taking the LTS. There. Now, this is one way of defining a story. You can select a story which has been, for example, selected by CSD, but you can also yourself go and decompose in more than 100 levers onto most of the things you can act upon, like the behaviors, the technologies in all of the sectors, how much import, export, the demographics, do people have children or not, do they eat carrots or do they eat meat, do they insulate their home, do they heat their homes, and so forth. You can really describe on the fly how you would like a net zero scenario. And then you can sort of slice and dice the information at total level on most of the things ranging from emissions, energy, all the activities and cost. And then same thing per sector. And then you have all the slice and dice. Each time below the graphs, you'll have the assumptions, which might look technical, but are very important for the experts to see, is this aligned with this standard or this standard? How do you include biomass bunkers and this kind of things? Now, this is one way of using the tool. Another way of using the tool is to, and I have a larger screen on this, is to be able to compare how we model things and how other models work, because a model is just there to challenge our thinking. And what you see here is the European Energy Agency reference scenario with existing measures. And then you see it here on transport. And you see it on the left on what the model described. And it's really about being able to interpret, okay, these other models have these assumptions. Here we have these assumptions. How do we compare them and then enrich the reflection of both? For example, if the government did something and you want to challenge it, you start by comparing the two and seeing why they are different. Now, whenever there's a scenario which is being described, you can go on the little question mark here and look at what is the description of each of the scenario. If we try to replicate through our tool another scenario, are there some discrepancies between the two, why, and so forth? All this is detailed. Now, a third kind of view you can have with this tool is by playing on the static, on the KPIs mode, which is written here. And that enables you to see simultaneously a lot of scenarios. Before it was just two, but once you go on KPIs where you just see one line at a time, then you can see various things. And here in this view, you can see the reference scenario, the NECP, the policy, you see that the difference of ambition in the EU, in the EEA reference and NECP is pretty small. However, in the policy scenario, you go already quite a level with more ambition, and then in the LTS, it goes further. Now I'll go back to the presentation and explain a few things onto what it does cover and what it does not cover. So we cover all the energy sectors and emissions, ranging also from the impacts on material use, production, societal, cultural dimensions. All the underlying assumptions, you can challenge them and look at them. It's extremely transparent. So if you look at any of the levers, you just click on it, and then you have the assumptions, the sources, all that is on the website without any login for free. This is open source. You can download the tool, the underlying tool. It's real time. Now, there's about 100 family of energy models out there, which are complementary. This is no tool which says this is how things are going to happen. We don't say this is the probability that this scenario is going to happen. We simulate various scenarios and see what are the trade-offs and implications of the various scenarios. We don't do cost optimization, which we think is a strength, because assessing costs on the long term is something which is not very robust. And then we don't do a macroeconomic analysis here, but this is an input macroeconomic analysis. It's really used about a model which should be used to explore the solution space and then to complement with more like economic models afterwards, or sector-specific models afterwards. All the way you can describe some levers is for everything, ranging from your behaviors to the technologies. You can move the sliders here from level 1, I have no ambition, to level 4, I have an extremely high ambition. So if I take the mode of transport here in Bulgaria, for the share of cars, you see that from the low ambition to the high ambition, you can reduce significantly along time the share of different model types, and then you have various details available. So this level 1 to 4 is common for everything, and you can use it to develop pathways, to convert a high-level government measure like or objective, like I'm going to reduce the emissions in the transport sector in 2030 by 30%. And then you can operationalize it and here say, okay, in transport, I have these levers on which I can work upon, which are behavioral, then all these levers which are technological. And then that really helps to operationalize a roadmap of a country. You can explore the cost implications, CapEx, fuel, other OpExes, make the link between the recovery funds and the needs which are identified through the tool. And then there's also some non-monetary implications. Now, there's a lot of countries which use this methodology at world level, continents. Then you have a list of countries here which have deployed this methodology. So it's really a community which is working in the same direction. Also some provinces. And then on the website, you have all the EU countries with the official data, and it's working and it's robust. But in addition, you have either governments or NGOs which have which are reviewing in depth the underlying data, which are making quality assurance and so forth through a robust process, which ensures that when CSD was sharing information with you, they've really undergone a strong quality assurance process with a sort of inconsistency checks. It's the work of several years of collaboration. That's it. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you so much, Michelle. This is really inspiring, and you know, although we have worked with the calculator for the past 2 years, it's still interesting every time you explain it. Very, very insightful, and I think it's a quite an useful tool for policymakers, and we'll try to encourage also the Bulgarian government to use some of the scenarios or some of the findings and train experts to use it further, so that it becomes really a practical instrument for policy making. Now, moving on to Dr. Laszlo Szabo, who is the director of the Regional Center for Energy Policy Research in Budapest, Hungary. Laszlo is one of the best experts on energy markets, I would say, in Europe, with a big focus on Southeast Europe and general Central and Eastern European developments. He has advised the European Commission on a number of occasions, including on the functioning of gas and power markets. And we have worked with Laszlo on a number of modeling assessments about the future of the electricity market. So today I would ask him to focus more on Hungary, but also provide maybe a regional perspective on what is to come and how our electricity markets are going to develop over the next 10 years. Also in the context I would mention of the new Fit for 55 package of the European Union.
Thank you very much, Martin, for the kind introduction. Do you hear me well? Okay.
Yes.
So thanks for the introduction. I would say I mean, these were very nice words, but I would say without the team at REC and without the team who is sitting here, I mean, without the other experts here, we would not be able to achieve what we have achieved in the last few years. So it's always a teamwork, I think. And what I would add to is that this group of experts you see here, we are of course familiar with the whole EU trends and the EU markets, but our expertise lies rather in the Central Eastern European countries. So that's where we are focused now. And maybe I will start with some examples on Hungary, and then maybe we can move a bit forward. Okay, what do we see from this perspective on the EU policy as well, including the Fit for 55? And just really very briefly, because we are not that advanced with this tool and with the modeling what you have presented for Bulgaria. We work on it, but of course we have other tools as well, which we have to apply here. Maybe I should cover the same sectors or the same fuels which you have covered in your presentation. And concerning Hungary, of course, every country here follows a bit different pathway from the other, because we have different portfolio for the power sector, because we have different issues in the other sectors, in the energy sector as well. And but you would be able to tell that Hungary is in a bit better position in some many aspects, but we might be a bit lagging behind in other aspects. So where are we better in this decarbonization, long-term decarbonization pathway? In Hungary, we have the nuclear capacity operated, and there is a plan, so it's an ongoing work to replace it with another one. However, it's a big question mark. It was, and it will be a big question mark, that having 2,500 megawatts of nuclear, what will be the impact on the Hungarian power sector? It's of course carbon-free, but of course all the economy is a big question around. But the policy is there, so it will be built. We see maybe some delays there, but the old nuclear plant will be replaced. Concerning the lignite, we have one unit, rather bigger size, but there is an agreement that it will finish operation in 2025. So 26 on, we won't see lignite or coal-fired plant in Hungary, and we don't see any change in this policy up till now. So the policy is going on. There are a lot of dispute and argument. How can it be made in a just transition way that all those people who work there, the region, will have the tools and have the means as well to carry on with their economic activities. But up till now, we did not see any change in it. However, if we have a look at around Europe, it might not be the same in every country. So if you have a look at the Polish example and other examples, then some countries started to even postpone this decarbonization, coal transition in their portfolio. What is important to see at the same time here is that Hungary is in a better position, because actually it's not affecting too many miners here in Hungary. So that's in a sense easier to do. Renewable as one of the most efficient tool to decarbonize our power system. There is the good news that Hungary was really stepping on the gears. We had already the third option here. There are some calculations that we will be in 2 years' time at 2,500 gigawatts of renewable generation, quite sizable. So if you remember the Bulgarian figure, we're really at the top, and the plan is to have 6,000 or 7,000 already by 2030. And if we do like we do now, it will be there. So it's not a question. The latest option, actually, it's very nice. We have the zero support already there. In the first one, we still needed one. In the second one, there was a nice decrease. And just last week, we got the result for the third one, and it's really zero. So we are really following this trend, which we have seen in other European countries as well. So I think it's quite very promising, not only for Hungary, but the other countries can see this example that really we can go there. The same issues are there, what you have mentioned, that integration of this 2,500 megawatt will be an issue. Of course, everyone works on it. What we have observed actually that we are already close to 2,000. What we can see is that we don't see at the moment any integration issue at a serious level. So reserve market is there. We don't use much more balancing energy to have this capacity in the system. So it's really good news. The good news was that actually Hungary started to step into this energy efficiency world in a stronger push, because we introduced an obligation scheme last year, which should have already the results already this year. The problem was that due to the COVID, there is a bit of postponing it. However, this would have been a very nice tool because Hungary was lagging behind in energy efficiency. So our building stock and the industrial sectors, they did not consider it very seriously, and we didn't see too much improvement in these aspects. And maybe just a few words about the gas use and the flexibility provider in Hungary. Who do they see for the future? We have gas, and what we use is Russian gas as well, which means that we are very dependent on this resource. It's still forcing that because we don't have any other flexibility options in the power sector, we are still used for a while gas as the flexibility for fuel. However, there are big question marks in this year that this became too expensive. And then the earlier trend, which we have seen in the electricity market, that there was this coal to gas switch. In this year, we see the opposite effect, that the gas to coal switch would take place, which probably would last for a few months more, and we will be a bit more better situation to assess this type of switch in half a year time, because from that point on, we probably won't see this happening again. If you have a look at the long-term strategy of Hungary as well, we of course think of other fuels as well and other technologies, so battery storage and other storage will be there. And the government seems to be taking hydrogen in this long-term strategy as well. We mainly see it in the transport sector as the first step to enter into the business. So not that much in the industry, which is very interesting, because if you compare the European trends, mainly you see that this would be industry who would do the push. In Hungary, we think still that it might be the transport sector. And what is important to see here is that probably due to the nuclear capacity as well, Hungary is rather keen on having this whole portfolio of hydrogen production in the picture. So not only renewable-based one, but maybe nuclear and gas-based production of hydrogen on the long term. If you have a look at, and just maybe I can just stop here now, that where are we with the 2050 targets in these NECPs and the long-term strategies? We are probably much closer than Bulgaria. So there we would arrive close. I would say we are not there even in the plan. So there is still a remaining part of emission, but we are not that far away from these instruments by 2050. But of course, we'll have to see that how much of these policies and the instruments which are planned in these strategies will be really put in place. The good thing is that we have it in many aspects for the renewables. And maybe just one last word, we were talking about that as well, that how do we think about affordability for the consumers? Hungary already in 2013-15 introduced price cap for gas and electricity consumption, which seems to be, of course, that the government is taking care of the consumer. However, it is a tool which you have to use very carefully, because at the end, someone has to pay the bill. So if it's not the users of the energy, then it will be the central budget. It will be still paid by the users, but in a bit different way. And this thing that you are decoupling the prices from the energy use is not the best way forward in this world, because then you decouple this thinking that, okay, I can use some new instruments, new tools, new investments at household and other level to arrive to decarbonization and less energy use. Once you use this cap, then this link is broken, and it's very difficult to make people understand that they are responsible for this. They have to do. It's not only the government, but we personally have to do it. And that's why this modeling is very important, because we talk about behavioral change here. That link should be there, and we should not spoil it with these very stringent price caps. So in a nutshell, this is what I wanted to say. If you have a further question, I think we have time for that one. So thanks for your attention, and Vicky, we can move forward in the other countries. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Laszlo, for this comprehensive discussion. Two very important things that I think are very current right now. Renewable energy could work without state support, and at these price levels, it is commercially viable. So the whole change of mentality also in Southeast Europe about how to approach renewable energy investment should be changed. And second thing that is to be noted is that regulating prices could have detrimental effects along the supply chain and really stimulates wasteful consumption. And energy efficiency is a major problem for all countries in the region. So improving energy efficiency means also changing the signals, the price signals, I think. And this is a good segue to the presentation of Radu Dudau, who is the co-founder and director of the Energy Policy Group in Romania. Romania, a country with a much, how can I say, conservative vision also on liberalization, like Bulgaria. So I would love him to speak about that a little bit more, and about the future of the energy market in Romania. Just a quick word, the Energy Policy Group is probably the most influential energy think tank in Romania, and I think they have contributed to the formation of the Romanian National Energy Strategy to 2030. So you're very much an insider, Radu, and I would love to hear your viewpoint about the next 10 years and the development of the Romanian energy sector. Thanks. And sorry for that, but please try to keep it shorter. I know this is the curse of the last speakers.
Yeah, sure.
We need to catch up time.
Anything you want after this flattering introduction, just tell me how many minutes, and I'll manage. Really briefly, first of all, congrats to Constanța and your colleagues. Very nice work, very nice presentation. And indeed, Pathways Explorer turns out to be a very useful tool. Michel and his colleagues are doing a great job in Climact. With that, we at EPG, just as you in Sofia, are still having this project called XCalc, by which we are working with Climact on developing our own national scenarios for long-term decarbonization. We're a bit behind compared to you. We had to spend more time on the entry data, so there's more preparatory work, as it seems. However, we worked with Pathways Explorer, my colleagues, Konstantin and Mihnan mostly, to basically, decomposing the levers, as Michel put it, the about 100 of them, to try to find a reasonable trajectory, as we thought, for net zero. So basically, the most ambitious changes for energy are that we have to develop about 15 gigawatt of wind offshore power. So in the Black Sea, 22 gigawatt of solar, and 18 gigawatt of onshore, which is a lot of renewable power generation. And we thought this would be too much. And then, you know, working on long-term scenarios, because our government has not been able to do their job in time. So this is the reason why we're still doing our own scenario analysis. You end up going one way or the other, and you know, you're very surprised. This couldn't be. I mean, are we ever going to be able to do that? It's impossible. No way. But then we realized that regardless what pathway you end up taking, the depth of the transformation is going to be so large that it's practically unfathomable today. I mean, it's hard to conceive how deep going the transformation has got to be. And here we are. A lot more of renewable capacity has to be put in place in Romania, including offshore. For buildings, in terms of, let's say, reduction of carbon emissions, we end up with a 5-fold reduction in 2050. So there will be a remnant 1.9 million tons of CO2 equivalent in 2050. In industry, down from 41 million tons in 2015 to just 5 million tons in 2050. Sorry, that was energy supply, where we of course assume that coal phase out is going to be ended in spite of all lack of clarity, no clear governmental commitment at this point, and all this will have to be compensated. And we think land use has a lot of potential for you know, going from minus 21, almost 22 million ton CO2 of trapping capacity these days in 2015 to minus 26 in 2050. So in fact, most of the let's say offsetting for all the remnant emissions will come from land use and forest as well. Transport will have to be almost entirely electrified, and also waste and others will have to about halve their emissions from 7 million tons to half of that in 2050. So the renovation rate is 1.5, will have to be 1.5%. I mean, this is the assumption that we used. But again, this will have to be a challenge because the buildings pool is very obsolete, and for us with a project in this sector, it is a bit hard to see how this can be achieved unless we're getting much more ambitious more quickly. So I'll basically stop at that, and then be open for other questions if you have them. Just to add that strategic discussion has popped up all of a sudden on SMRs in Romania, small modular reactors. The government has announced that they're considering using small modular reactors on the sites of decommissioned lignite plants whereas until very recently, the whole restructuring plan of the national lignite company relied solely on renewables and some new gas power. So I'm not saying at this point doesn't make sense, but in terms of strategic planning, is everything seems to be still very unsettled at this point. Yeah. I'll stop here and I'll come back because I understand we're already under some time pressure.
Thank you so much, Rado. This was very interesting. The idea of pushing forward the decarbonization of the energy system via building modular reactors is gaining quite a lot of interest also in Bulgaria and across the region. It's still up in the air whether this would be a feasible option commercially now, maybe in 10 years or 15 years, we might think about that. In our thinking, in our modeling work, we see the need of new nuclear capacity in the region, maybe after 2040.
Just to clarify, the SMR technology isn't available now, so we couldn't possibly speak of any capacity earlier than the end of the decade. So
exactly. Moving forward, last but not least, I would like to invite Professor Dimitri Lalas to give his view on the Greek decarbonization potential. Professor Lalas is also one of the best energy experts in his country, in Greece. He has also led for 25 years the country's climate negotiations on the world scene. He has been also in charge of state-owned energy companies, has quite a lot of experience in different energy and climate fields in Greece. Dimitri, it's always a pleasure to hear you. I'm looking forward to your view on how the Greek energy transition is going.
Well, thank you, Martin. My turn to blush, as Radu did before. But anyways, I know given the pressure of time, I had prepared a small presentation of 26 slides, but I think I'll jump directly to the points that I would like to make.
Please, let's keep it to 5 minutes.
Okay.
Sorry for that.
First point, Greece has submitted both its NECP plan and a long-term strategy plan. The problem is that the NECP plan was done with the times model, basically. The long-term strategy plan was done with the primes model. Two different models, supposedly they were supposed to be joined in 2030, and then the primes would continue to 2050. As you can imagine, the joint there is not exactly a continuous joint. There is a gap, so that's one of the problems. The second problem has to do with the fact that the long-term strategy basically has followed a philosophy which says some scenarios that are basically business as usual, or business as usual with a turbocharging, then a second set that is energy conservation, and a third set that is new carriers, namely hydrogen and syngas and synfuels. And it turns out that any discussion about which of the ways that we would take forward after 2030 has not been done yet. And the reason why I'm saying that is because those three scenarios, but basically the last two, diverge essentially. The energy conservation type scenario calls for about 38 gigawatts of renewables. The new carriers scenario calls for 78 gigawatts of renewables. How you can get 78 gigawatts of renewables, it's not clear, but that is one of the things that where we need indeed additional modeling. And here's where the pathways tool come very handy in the future. So that's point number one. Point number two has to do with the fact that we should stop and think a little bit about whether it makes any sense anymore to talk about a different NECP and a separate long-term scenario. a modeler knows that if you're going to do modeling, you're not going to stop at 2030. You have to go further than that, because again, you cannot expect realistically to have discontinuity in fields. So I think that we should actually press that we should have one set of scenarios which go all the way to 2050. Third point, we need to make sure that we have transparency in the official scenarios, and in that respect, the transparency of the tool, the pathways tool, is indeed so much better. That
I'm sorry, Dimitri, your connection is breaking quite badly. Would it be possible maybe for you to switch off the camera to improve the speed? Because you're breaking up a little bit.
I'm not so sure. Can you hear me better now, maybe?
Yes, it's a bit better, yes.
Okay. So the third point I was making is that the transparency in both the mechanics and the results of the NCPs and the long-term term strategy plans is not very good. And indeed, they do not help to in any discussion that we might have. And that's where the pathways tool will provide us with a capability to indeed go in depth in both the assumptions and the results to produce meaningful public discussions of where we're going. And in that respect, I think that the capabilities that we have to develop new scenarios is indeed very substantial, and we should make sure we make use of it, and we plan to. We're not as advanced in the pathways development as you guys are, but we hope by the end of this year that we would be indeed advanced to continue in that respect. The situation in Greece in general used to be very bright. Lately, we are getting some mixed signals. Why? Because the new climate draft, climate law that was tabled for public consultation sets a very ambitious 80% reduction by 2040, but at the same time, it backslides as far as the delignitization goes, because while we thought that all the power plants will be out by 2028, but most of them, except one, would actually stop operating by 2025. That 2025 early reduction is now in doubt. So, but in any case, at least the 2028 deadline remains, and it will be now in the climate law as well. So at least that is one way that we can make their scenarios a little bit more realistic as far as the delignitization process is concerned. Mind you, as far as the rest of the stuff, all the takeaways that you guys found using the tool for Bulgaria apply in Greece as well. There are a number of issues that need to be looked a little more carefully. For example, reduction of demand in the building and tertiary sectors. Yes, indeed, you can put numbers on paper, but they're very unrealistic. It takes a lot of money to build buildings, especially when you have a lot of them. And how you go about doing that, I think is something that we in Greece need to be very, very careful about analyzing it, including the costs, and making sure that we put the other conditions in place to do it. As far as transport is concerned, there things are no problem. But now taking a little bit also a look at what is going to happen in the wider energy supply sector, we do have the luxury of having at least one terminal for LNG, and we're building a second one, as you know, in Renewables. Okay, so that diversifies the supply part. But the question of whether the quick reduction of the lignite plants will open the door for new natural gas plants is valid. A number of natural gas plants, one of them is almost finished. It will start operating probably at the end of 2022. And there are at least 4 more in the works, or at least have finished their permitting stage. And I think that they need to make a decision, a financial decision, whether they're going to go ahead or not. And finally, the ambitious targets for renewables until 2050 need to be put on the table, and so that people realize that what that entails, so that some of the barriers that include also local opposition need to be addressed and put out of the way. But it is actually, and let me finish with that, it's actually very interesting that by 2050, no matter how you slice it and how you divide it, we need to be zero, right? Which means that the question is not whether we're going to end up at zero by 2050, but how we do it and how fast we do it. And in this point, again, let me say that the tool will be a very, very, very useful to focus the debate on how that is done, i.e. how the trajectories can be figured to go there in a robust way and financially a profitable way. So let me stop at here.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. I think a very valid point, and this is kind of a segue to finishing up with our conference today. It's important to step on data-driven analysis when figuring out long-term decarbonization policy, because ad hoc decisions usually have consequences, impacts decades forward. So if countries, governments tend to take popular decisions now that follow very short-term goals, short-term political objectives, it is very difficult to then change that dynamic if you haven't stepped upon a very clear pathway towards where you want to go. So this is a common problem for all Southeastern European countries, I think. There is one question in the chat, and it is very specific to Laszlo and Rado, and which is about the role of liquid renewable fuels for the energy transition in Hungary and Romania. Maybe just a quick word on that from you, and then we're going to wrap up the discussion.
Thank you. So just very briefly that, what you can see from all this energy modeling, that transport is a very difficult sector. So what we see that even price signals and signals which drive the behavior of our way of toward the transport is a very difficult one. So we have to see that, okay, what are the short-term, medium-term, and long-term solutions for that one? And I think in that sense, these fuels can serve as a bridge for the longer term. However, it has to be seen that, for example, first-generation biofuels have their impacts as well. So we really have to find solution if we really go for deep or zero decarbonization, that how long we can have there, and then what are the other measures and pathway decarbonization, the transport sector. Maybe I give the floor to the others as well on this.
Rado?
I can just say that the major oil and gas company of the country, OMV Petrom, because they are basically the monopolist oil producer, is considering production of biofuels, and I'm not sure about the plan of other retailers, but there's certainly a new target for our RFNBOs. For instance, renewable fuels of non-biological origin, which is actually a different name for clean hydrogen-based fuels. It's 2.5% till 2030, which is a lot. And then again, the target for clean hydrogen becomes a challenge. So there's a lot of talk right now, both for fuels of biological and non-biological origin to be produced in Romania, rather at corporate level than in let's say, governmental planning documents. I also see interest from investors for the sector. So I think, yeah, we'll see some investments.
Thanks so much, Rado. Indeed, we didn't touch upon too much about the rest of the economy outside of the energy sector, but this is going to be the core of our research next year. We'll try to analyze the implications of the effort sharing regulation and the different impacts of the new ETS scheme, together also with Michelle and Klimak. So it's going to be an exciting year. I think governments and stakeholders in Southeast Europe are slow to realize the implications, and they haven't been too active in proposing different solutions or arguing even against the European Union decisions. But I imagine 2022 would be filled with heated debates on what is possible, what is feasible until 2030. So we're looking forward to more discussions like this one. So thank you very much all for taking part in the panel. Thank you for your very comprehensive analysis, and thank you to the participants for being patient with us. Sorry for running a little bit over time. Looking forward to meeting you again here, or physically, hopefully soon. And goodbye. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.